Why, hello there. Welcome to my channel, Save Infinity. So in this video, just wanted to kind of do a little reminder of, not being afraid to live, while you're alive, get a little bit silly. And also, felt like a good video to kind of do as well, because so often in the videos I do, while I'm, channeling or what have you, or, just doing and sharing the information as I do, I tend to, in that sort of state, get into, a bit of a, serious sort of, poised and concentrated sort of demeanor, because that's just, how it helps me to kind of, be able to let that flow come through. But that's not just, how I just go around existing 24/7. So, not being afraid to live while you're alive, the importance of, living while you're alive. Being free, being, wild, being, your goofy goofball self. Not being afraid to, dance that dance or sing that song. Especially as, so often in these sort of, 3D sort of human lives, the way we, live things and go about things, we so often tend to, kind of say like, oh, I'll do that later, I'll have that experience later, I'll go on that adventure or trip later, I'll, and just put things off for later, but, later doesn't really exist. All we have is the now, right? The now is, the place that everything is. And although we are, are infinite and eternal, souls, we're still, not like infinite and eternal in the aspect of, this life and experience we're having, right here, right now. And so, you kind of want that balance between, being serious and, doing the things you have to, and also, doing the things you want to, taking a risk, being adventurous, just getting a little bit silly, letting the little goblin in you come out to play, running around your house like a gremlin. And as I said, having that balance with it, you don't want to go and be completely reckless, especially to the point that, you cause harm for yourself or anything. Like, sure, going and, jumping off a cliff that's only 2 meters high, but, not jumping off one that's like 500 meters high. Allowing yourself to have fun, to, let go, be free, be, goofy or wild, and just, being human. Not everything has to be so perfect and so structured. Sometimes when it goes too far that way, then, the little inner goblin we have gets a little bit like, hello. And sometimes some energies can get, a little uptight in those ways, but, not giving mind to that at all either. And sometimes those sort of aspects, can get a little, it's a bit of fear-based, a bit of fear energy, which is devil energy, as they say. And, we don't delve into that around these neck of the woods. So yeah, this is, your call, your sign to, let go of the fear, let go of the worry, let go of the stress, and, just allow yourself to be and to play and to have fun, to be silly and goofy, and to do what feels good for you, baby. You don't want to look back on your life and wish that you had more fun, or you went on that adventure, or, you danced in that moment. You want to, look back on your life with glee and happiness that you really used that opportunity to live while you're alive. You're alive, So it's like, get out there and you fly, my pretties, fly like the little wild goose you are. And not being, so worried and caught up in all that sort of, that's doesn't really matter at the at the end of the day and on the grand scale. What matters is the experience we're having. So yes, we need that balance to be able to still have some seriousness and structure in some ways, that we don't completely just fall off the boat and drown. But we also want to enjoy the experience too, right? So strut your stuff, dance your move, sing your song, and don't be afraid to get a little silly with it. Because while yes, as we mentioned, some of that sort of seriousness and structure and stability and all that is so important to be able to even have an experience and to keep such a thing existing. We still want it to be joyful and fun. And we're here to to love and to have fun and just to enjoy the experience of experiencing together. Just loosen that tie and get a little jiggy with it. Alright, well, I'll leave this one here. But as always, sending you so much peace, love, light, and blessings. Bye.